Welcome to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerantz. On this episode, we'll be speaking with 3 out of 5 of San Luis Obispo County's supervisors. We start with Adam Hill. He is, of course, a member of that board, and I want to speak with you about a phenomenon that we're seeing on the Central Coast, specifically in San Luis County, and it deals with high-tech companies that often incubate here, but then they fly out of the nest and they leave.
Right.
But maybe that's not happening so much anymore.
Yeah, as you know, we have a great university in Cal Poly that has always produced incredibly talented students, has great alumni, great faculty, and great programs. And so what we've seen through the years, of course, are these terrific companies that grow to a certain size, somebody else purchases them, and
they're off.
Right. So what we've seen, and we've been part of this, the county has an economic development program with our Economic Vitality Corporation.
Right.
And the city and others have been working to really basically stop that trend and work with companies and find out, what is it that you need to stay here? How can we help you? And we have seen increasingly over the last few years companies that have grown to a certain size staying here, going into new buildings, hiring new employees, expanding their operations here.
And most recently, there was an incredibly exciting development, and that's with a company called MindBody. Tell us about MindBody.
MindBody's a locally created software company. Their software is used in gyms and spas and hotels.
Feels very Central Coast.
Yeah, and the folks that started that have been growing the company just exponentially. I mean, just literally out the doors.
Right.
They're having to park in our airport parking lots because they don't have any parking in their own buildings.
Right, but the good news
is that they're building a new campus. A kind of a Silicon Valley style campus, with separate buildings and basically facilities to keep their employees happy while they're working their butts off.
Wow.
And
where?
This company, out near the airport.
Okay, near San Luis Airport. Okay.
So the southern part of San Luis is really growing. We're seeing a lot of great companies, staying and getting buildings built out there. And this company, I think, has already had 3 rounds of venture capital. So money from investors is coming into this company and growing the company here. So they're going to have hundreds new employees over
give us a sense. What does that mean for this county, which, by the way, did fairly well during the economic downturn? It wasn't as hard hit as some other counties in the state of California. But still, job growth is always a good news. So give us a sense.
And that's been a great focus of mine because we want to see head of household jobs. We want to see young professional class. We don't want to just be a certain kind of place. And so when a company like MindBody grows and commits to staying here, what that means is it's committing to jobs. And those jobs are the people who buy homes.
Of course.
And who spend their money here, pay their taxes here, and it just recycles through the local economy.
And so the sense is, how many employees? I mean, do you know how much they have now and how?
They have over 500, I think, now.
Oh, wow.
I think that the ultimate growth plans is to have as many as 1,000 locally.
Oh my! So this
and
is
they'll have
great
branches
news.
elsewhere. Oh, this is
great news.
It's certainly great.
I want to shift gears, if I may, and speak with you about a continuing topic in this county. It deals with groundwater.
Right.
What we know is that the Paso groundwater basin in North San Luis Obispo County, it's being tapped.
Yeah.
It's pretty serious. Overpumped is the word. Talk to us about the severity of the problem, as scientists tell us.
Yeah. Well, we have it from the level of obviously hydrology, and so we could talk about it in a very specific technical way. But we have it probably most importantly from people whose wells have literally gone dry.
Let's do this. Let's talk about it more when we come back. So I want to continue our conversation about the groundwater crisis here in San Luis County. For our viewers on HLN, thanks for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back on Charter California Edition. So I like the way you describe it. We can talk about it scientifically or talk about it as it impacts people. Tell us how it's impacting people, the over-tapping of the groundwater basin.
Well, the most obvious is that we have rural homeowners who live on wells who have seen their wells go dry. Some have had to drop their wells deeper to find water, and others have had to drill new wells. And this is expensive and it's precarious.
And it's a scenario that's playing out right now in North San Luis Obispo County. But it's happening up and down the state. I mean, this is not a unique scenario.
No, it's not. It's not unique at all to California or even the West at this point.
So what's interesting is, like all controversial issues, politics plays a significant role in the resolution of it. And because of the sad and untimely passing of Paul Teixeira, a member of the Board of Supervisors, there were only 4 board members left, and that caused a unique situation whereby any emergency ordinance needed unanimity.
Right.
Recently, Governor Brown appointed Karen Ray to fill that seat, and so that changed the dynamic, and there is news to report.
Yeah, Karen's very first meeting
Right.
as an official member of our board was to extend the ordinance to the full 2 years.
And what does that mean for those that are just joining us? And by the way, Karen Ray will be on our program later in this half hour. So why don't you tell us what that means?
It's essentially a timeout. It's a 2-year timeout to try to reduce, to do a few things. One of which is to reduce the overpumping. The other, of course, is to start working on long-term solutions and short-term solutions too that will help, whether it's provide more water or do better in the ways that we use water, whether it's conservation, whether it's technology and the use of it.
Is there a grandfather clause at all to assist those that may be in the middle of something?
Right,
I don't know what that something could be.
Yeah,
but
that's what we will come. That's probably going to be the most controversial thing next coming,
Okay.
which is vested rights. Who has, basically through our interpretations, who has the ability to move forward on what they've been planning,
Right.
and who has to basically live with the timeout for a couple of years.
Right, because let's face it, Paso has really grown up as a result of its expanding wine industry.
Right.
And, query who's causing the overpumping. Is it residential? Is it ag? I don't know that we know that. But I presume that no one on the board wants to see the wine industry suffer.
No, and we're not really even interested in trying to lay blame.
Right.
We want to be able to get our arms around this problem as best as we can, because we understand that the courts always tend to be the final
Right.
say
And-
if people are not happy.
Right, and that happened in South County.
It has happened here.
And
It's
it's called an adjudication.
It's called adjudication. It usually takes a long time, and it
Right.
costs a lot of money, and it's never fun.
But at this stage, we've avoided that.
So far, and even if that is the ultimate course, the more progress we can make now, the better it is for that process.
Okay.
And so I think that's what we're focusing on. How do we, and I think that was probably the most important thing about Karen's vote and the board's vote to extend the ordinance, which is bringing people together who really have been upset at each other.
I want to speak with you now about the Affordable Care Act. Lots of news about the purported fiasco, demise, whatever you want to call it, of healthcare.gov. It doesn't impact Californians.
Right.
Does not one bit, because we have Covered California.
Correct.
As you're out and about in San Luis County, what are you hearing about Covered California?
I think most people, there's a lot of mixed feelings about
Right.
healthcare, and I don't know. The interesting thing is, I don't know anyone who even has good healthcare insurance that thinks that it's great. Meaning that they think there's nobody, including myself, that says, this couldn't be better. This couldn't, So
Right.
I hope, as we see in the county, to be able to extend healthcare coverage to people, especially in the preventative ways
Right.
that end up costing us all more money later on. And from a simple, economic sense, the more money we can invest in people getting seen by doctors and dentists early, the less money.
Preventative.
The less money that's going to be spent later. So I'm glad that California has been a leader on this.
Right.
It's a shame that the rollout of the Affordable Care Act has been such a, as you say, fiasco.
Right, but that's, again, it doesn't
It
impact
hasn't.
Californians.
Yeah, I mean we're not. So that's
We're not part of healthcare.gov.
Right. So whereas I'm sure other people, especially because of the politics that are being made of it, are hearing from their constituents or from groups. I don't think I've received a single email from somebody complaining about healthcare as relating
Covered
to
California.
relating to Covered California.
Any news on Medicaid expansion? Because that's ultimately a county program.
Well, that's something that we're prepared for. We've done all the hiring of the people that we need to expand that. We have we expect the money to come in.
See what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. His name is Adam Hill. He's the supervisor in San Luis County. When we come back, we'll be speaking with one of his colleagues. Her name is Debbie Arnold. And then we'll speak with the newest member of the board, Karen Ray. I'm Brad Pomerantz. It's Charter California Edition.
What percentage of California's water comes from groundwater? 15, 30, 40, or 50%? Roughly 30% of water deliveries in California come directly from groundwater.
Welcome back. It's Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerantz. Our guest, Debbie Arnold, member of the Board of Supervisors in San Luis Obispo County. And you have a new member. She came on the board very differently than you did. You ran in an election. It was hard fought. She was appointed as a result of the sad passing of Paul Teixeira. Her name is Karen Ray. We're going to speak with her in a moment.
Good.
Wow. I mean, what does this do to the board? I mean, it really changes the dynamic suddenly.
Actually, it's been great to have the
Right.
seat filled.
That's true, right?
Yes.
Let alone who cares who it is?
Yeah,
it's the seat
and
filled.
it's been great to get to know Karen, but most importantly, the having a vacant seat on the board, it makes it difficult. No matter what the rest of the board tries to do to accommodate the 4th District, we aren't as familiar with the people that live in the 4th District as someone coming
Right.
out of the 4th District.
Right.
So I
and
think
that's
it's
being the
been-
district in which Karen is now representing.
Correct.
Right.
Mhm.
And interestingly, just because of events, you had a board that needed a 4/5 majority for a variety of votes. You only had 4 members, and so that meant you needed anonymity, or unanimity, I should say. And so that posed its own challenges.
Exactly.
Um,
Yes, we ran for the second time in recent history. We did run with an urgency ordinance,
Right.
and an urgency ordinance follows very different rules
It
than a
does.
regular ordinance. So yes, we were needed the entire board to agree on in a few instances.
And so
the
let's
last few
talk
months.
about the most critical incident, if I may say, and that deals with the groundwater urgency ordinance. I know that you focused a lot of your time and energy upon it. You represent significant portions of the area impacted by the groundwater in the Paso Basin. Ultimately, I guess there was an initial vote whether to have a temporary urgency ordinance. You had voted for it. Then there was a second vote where there was a discussion about an extension. You had voted against it. And then when the third vote came, when the new member came on, you abstained. So clearly there was you had a lot of emotions flowing over this issue.
I sure did, and
So-
thank you for giving me the
Yes.
opportunity. My biggest population center in my district is the city of Atascadero, but they happen to be in a sub-basin of the larger basin, so they are not affected. They're exempt from the ordinance.
How interesting.
Saying that, out in the rural areas, that I do cover a large portion of that,
Right.
and some of the more densely
Right.
populated subdivisions. So it really mattered. The agricultural industry is important to me, as we've spoken
Well, Paso, I mean,
about
the
that.
wine
Mhm.
industry.
That's it. And
Right.
it doesn't just involve the wineries or the growers, but also the hotels and the restaurants, et cetera. And a big part of the
And the
economic
residents.
engine and the residents, the
Right.
jobs.
Right.
So the first time it was a 45-day ordinance, urgency ordinance. I voted for that.
Right.
Let's calm
Right.
down and let's discuss
Figure out
this.
what's going on.
The second time, though, where I had a problem and voted against it, was a very important part of the ordinance remained and still remains undefined. And that is the term vested, or who is in the
Right.
pipeline. Who is exempt from this? If you've invested millions of dollars
Right.
in preparation and that just evaporates.
And I just spoke with Adam Hill, and I asked him about that very issue. And his response was, Adam Hill being a supervisor, that we need to look at this issue. This issue needs to be evaluated over the next few months. So is that where we are?
The problem that I have, I told him on the dais, I cannot vote for any law, temporary. I mean, this is a 2-year law, but temporary
Right.
or not, when it's not been written. Half, a good
The
portion
vested
of it.
rights issue is still to be
it's not-
determined. It's not a regulation that could be written.
It's a definition. We never
okay.
had a definition for vested that pertained to agriculture. So again, the job creators in the North County right now really are the growers, the vineyards,
Right.
et cetera. They've invested.
Let's talk more about it when we come back, because it is
Sure.
a very important issue.
Okay.
We're speaking with Debbie Arnold. For our viewers on HLN, I want to thank you so much for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back on Charter California Edition. So Supervisor Arnold, I want to continue our conversation about this question of vested rights, because it is an important one. Supervisor Hill indicated that it's an issue that needs to be evaluated. You expressed serious concerns about the lack of definition in the ordinance that did pass. So where do we go from here?
That will be defined, and it will be defined as a separate resolution. So it'll be a definition that remains with the county. Anytime we come up against a need for a definition of vested rights pertaining to agriculture, this definition will be
So
in place.
ultimately, you
But it
will
won't-
define it.
3 votes.
3 votes defines it.
Correct. So it's different than the urgency
Right.
ordinance that requires 4. And my concern is, again, the economic engine of the North County revolves around the growing of grapes.
Right.
we have companies or wineries or family-owned sometimes that have come in the last year or so and invested business investments of millions of dollars. What happens to those people if they're told that investment?
Right. I mean, basically, we're dealing with a grandfather clause. You know,
Correct.
there is a 2-year stop, a 2-year timeout, but like we have said, what happens if you've already engaged in the run-up to trying to build more wineries or whatever it may be, vineyards or...
Our county continues, we continue to say we're trying to attract and retain businesses, but these are businesses that have invested, and what does it say to them?
So you need 3 votes, and so it's about collaboration, although you have the Brown Act, so I'm not sure how you collaborate.
No, it'll just be treated as any issue. I worry about if it's not done right, it will affect jobs, it'll affect the business model.
But how will you collaborate? Because look, it's important that somehow there be a consensus on this issue, but you're not allowed to talk to each other, right?
We can talk to one other supervisor. Coming from the agricultural arena, vineyard development it's important to understand vineyard development, and I think right now the planning department is working on that.
Can you talk to them?
You can talk to your staff, sure.
So you can
input. I can give input to the staff on what I think is important.
Without an issue of the Brown Act.
Actually, ironically, the staff came up in an original ordinance with an excellent definition, and I continued to ask that we just go back to staff's definition. We ended up with an undefined term being vested, so that needs to be remedied.
Arguably that definition could creep its way back into the ultimate resolution that's passed. Okay, I want to change gears if I may, because we've been focused so much on water, and I know the counties also has other priorities, presumably, and you're also looking at renewables.
Yes.
I mean, I think about, do you represent the Carrizo Plain?
Yes.
Okay, the Carrizo Plain, God, I used to talk about that all the time.
Yeah.
It's a solar farm,
Yeah.
Southwest County, did I say that right?
East.
South,
Yeah.
right, of course,
Yeah.
Southeast County, west would be the coast.
Actually, be kind of the northeast part of the county.
I got it all wrong. I got it completely
That's
wrong.
okay, but we
Southwest north, so it's the northeast county. What's happening with the Carrizo Plain and other renewables?
Well, you know, the Carrizo Plains projects are almost finished.
Right, so that's done, right?
Yeah, and so in just a matter of months now, those will be completely finished, and all the work that's come about and jobs from those projects that'll end. And once those projects are completed, they require very few people to maintain the actual solar farms.
Nice, but unfortunate. We like the job creation.
The job creation, right. So, but that will provide, put on the grid all of that energy coming from the solar farms. But the county's working on some other things that allow more properties to be utilized in other parts of the county in very small versions of the little solar.
And of course, some forget that nuclear is renewable. And here in San Luis County, we have Diablo Canyon. We don't have San Onofre.
No.
Amen to that. And Diablo Canyon is still operational and
it still is.
Largest job creator in the county, correct?
It is.
Right.
Yeah. And they are looking at relicensing.
Of course, and that's a discussion point as well.
Right.
So is there anything that the residents can do as we look towards renewables to participate?
Well, I think that residents in this county, if they do want to participate in the green energy and the renewables, there are so many options out there now, and technology is being perfected all the time, and they could look into everything from rooftops to.
But do they need to contact the county, or is this something that can be done independently?
They could go online to the county and find a lot of information, because there are a lot of incentive programs now.
County, state, and federal.
Correct.
Her name is Debbie Arnold. She is a member of the Board of Supervisors in San Luis Obispo County. When we come back, we'll be meeting her newest colleague. Her name is Karen Ray, recently appointed by Governor Brown to the seat. I'm Brad Pomerantz. It's Charter California Edition.
How many incorporated cities are found in San Luis Obispo County? 3, 5, 7, or 11? San Luis Obispo County includes 7 incorporated cities.
Welcome back. It's Charter California Edition. Yes, she is here. She is Karen Ray, the newest member of the Board of Supervisors in San Luis Obispo County. Huge congratulations. What a whirlwind you have just gone through. A teacher at Santa Maria High School, a member of the Arroyo Grande City Council, but as a result of the sad passing of Paul Teixeira, the appointment became available, and it's a gubernatorial appointment. What does that mean? How did it work?
That's a good question. And first of all, it's so important whenever I talk about this to make sure that I acknowledge the death of Supervisor Teixeira. And when I found out, we got notified through the county as public officials across the county, and that was a really tough morning.
Devastating.
I lost my mom when she was in her 50s, so I know what that feels like for their family, and it was really tough.
Just what a teddy bear of a guy.
Yeah. And so I spent a couple of weeks deciding whether to put my name in. The governor's office opened that up for an application. There was an online application, and that filing period was open for about a month. And then the governor's office went through and by phone interviewed. My understanding is they interviewed every one of those applicants,
and ultimately narrowed down to 3.
We
understand it.
I think that's what's been presented, but there's no evidence that that's what happened.
That's interesting.
So I can't confirm that.
Okay.
I can only confirm that I was still in it to the end.
Right, yeah, obviously.
So,
now, so you took the phone call.
I took the phone call.
And so then do you go to Sacramento and meet the governor, meet the lieutenant governor, or what happens next?
Wouldn't that have been great?
I know, I was going to say.
No, it was a much more formalized process than that. And the way that it worked was the governor's office have an appointments division that only does this. And they work very, very hard year round.
Right.
There are so many appointments.
Right.
And the interesting part is the application that we filled out is the same application that you fill out for every other appointment across the state, including the Fair Board.
Right.
And so it's
the
a very
Unemployment
generic
Insurance Commission, whatever it may be.
Exactly. It's a very generic form. And so what they did was they did the phone interviews, and then from there they kind of narrowed down to the ones they actually wanted to vet.
I see.
And then they began that vetting process. And then, so within the next month after that, so it was probably a good another 4 weeks, then they began inviting people up to Sacramento.
Okay.
And there were several people that went up there. The newspapers reported 3, but there were more.
I see.
And those people were invited up for in-person interviews.
And you met with the governor, or you met with his staff?
I met with the appointments office the first time. And so there were 3 people in that interview, all from the governor's office.
Right.
You know, it wasn't. They're professionals.
I see.
And they were very, very
and
good
you're a
at
teacher. You speak in public. The hardest crowd, 12th graders. So that was probably easy compared to the 12th graders.
Exactly. So that was fun, and they asked. Fun might be a stretch.
Right. Okay.
But,
fair enough.
They asked lots of questions that related to things that didn't come out on that generic form. So they were talking about. Things like, give us an example of when you made a difficult decision, or give us an example of who your supporters and opponents are, those kinds of questions, and really kind of getting more into the meat of what have you done.
How long was that interview?
Probably about an hour and a half, something like that.
And so you had to go up a second time?
I sat, and remember, I'm in the dark in between. And so, and all the appointees were. And so I got done with that interview, came back and I drove for that. I have lots of people are saying they got flown. I didn't get any flight.
Right.
So I drove up for that one, drove back, and didn't hear another word for several weeks. And then, the rumor mill was flying about what was happening. But all I know is that, and I couldn't give anything to the media. The first time around, I could give something to the media and say, here's what the process is and all of that.
So when we come back, I want to hear the punchline.
Okay.
You know it's a good one. For our viewers on HLN, thank you so much for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back on Charter California Edition. So Supervisor, you then hear nothing. Radio silence for 6 weeks.
Radio silence.
And then what?
And then I got a call asking, and it was a very, not abrupt, but it was a, we'd like to see you again. Can you come up for another interview?
Okay.
And I said, yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
And
up you go.
Up I went. I had, I don't even remember, maybe 48 hours notice to get that to happen, and headed back up there for a second interview. Again with 2 of the 3 people that I interviewed with the first time.
Okay.
And I was told before I went up there that it may or may not include the governor. It's up to the governor.
Right.
And he did not attend that interview.
Okay.
So we finished that interview, and I headed back down, and I was told that, and and this is the case, I think people who know Jerry Brown
Right.
know that this governor is beholden to nobody.
Oh, no doubt.
He makes his decisions. He's a very involved legislator, or I guess he's
Right.
an executive,
Yeah,
but
right.
with legislation. And at the time, it was during when he had about 800 bills sitting on his desk.
Yes.
And he
This is
will
late
go
August,
through
September,
every
right.
single one of those bills, whether it was a unanimously passed bill. He will still go through it and vet it. It's one of the things that I'm most proud of about our governor.
So radio silence again?
So radio silence, and I was expecting that I might get a call from the governor because I had heard he was so hands-on, and sometimes he will just ask for clarifying information from his office, and sometimes he'll make the call himself.
Right.
So what happened was
How many weeks after that second interview?
1 or 2.
Oh, okay, so it was fairly quick.
Yeah, it was pretty quick, and I'm sitting in class.
Oh, no.
And
Teaching what?
it was my government class.
Okay, at least it was government.
How ironic.
How appropriate,
Actually,
right?
econ.
Okay,
It was
so-
economics. So, yeah,
also ironic.
My 12th graders.
Right.
And I see my phone light up, and it's on silent, and I see it's a 916
I
area
just got a
code.
stomachache.
Yeah.
I just got a stomachache.
and my stomach
Right.
went up, but I couldn't answer it because I'm in class and I'm being
Right.
a professional. So I knew that the call had come in, and then not 60 seconds later, same phone number, second call. So it was a darn it, pick up the phone kind of
Exactly.
call, and I still couldn't do it.
So what did you do?
I sat and looked. I just thought,
Right.
okay, well, I'll have to wait till my break. And then a text came through, and this was, and again, I didn't know who the phone number was. I just knew it was Sacramento, and it was from the appointments secretary, and it said, I need to talk to you as soon as possible.
Did you text her back?
I only texted her saying, I'm sorry, I can't talk to you for another hour until I get my
I'm in
break.
class,
I'm
right.
in class. And she said, no problem, absolutely.
It actually was probably impressive to her that you took that responsibility very seriously.
Oh, absolutely. I'm never going to sacrifice my kids or my
Right.
classroom. Those kids come
So
first.
the moment came, it was October 4th.
Yes.
And I can only imagine the flood of emotions you must have felt. What's also most remarkable, speaking of floods, is a few days later you had to take a vote on the on the issue of lack of floods
Right.
in North County, the groundwater basin.
Right, absolutely. And so I took I got the call on Thursday. I went in on Friday, took the oath. Well, first
Right.
I resigned from my council
Yes,
position on
Aurora
Friday
Grande,
afternoon,
right.
and then went straight up here and took my oath, got my keys. I spent the whole weekend in the office
You did.
setting things up. But it's important to note that from the public's point of view, what they saw was the ceremonial swearing in
Right.
on Tuesday morning, and then me take an enormous vote, probably the biggest vote at the Board of Supervisors in the last decade.
Oh, no doubt. Dealing
And-
with groundwater and passing an urgency ordinance to put a timeout on any type of further water development for 2 years.
Right, and it's not even necessarily a timeout in that it has some flexibility.
There's
That there
the-
is some
the grandfather
some-
clause.
Right, and there's also you can do things with a 1-to-1 offset, and that was
Right,
part of
of
those
course.
negotiations. But it's important for the public to recognize that I had spent 3 months preparing for that
So
vote.
you knew that if you were appointed, you probably would have to take a vote on this very critical issue, and we're preparing.
Absolutely, and as part of the appointments process, in those interviews, we talked about water, and I would presume that they asked other applicants as
Of
well
course.
what their points of view was on that. So.
How's it been? How's it been? You're on the dais. I mean, you're there.
Being on the dais has not been an adjustment. I mean, I've been in.
You're a teacher.
Well, no, and I've been
Aurora
in,
Grande, right.
So I've been doing this for almost 10 years. So being there and dealing with staff reports and figuring out the lay of the land, that was easy. That's the easy part. It's the hard part has just been the sheer number of meetings that I've had back to back. I'm working, 10, 12-hour
Sure.
days, or the norm 14 are not out
And
of the.
you get thrown immediately into an election cycle.
Yes, exactly.
You need to run to finish out the term of Mr. Teixeira, and that primary is in June.
That primary is in June. So for right now, I will fulfill his seat until January,
Right.
I believe it's the 3rd of 2015. But again, we're going to come right into the election season, so that in January is the filing period,
Right.
and then in June is the primary. And if it just really depends on
And
how
then
many
you could
people
have
are
an
in the
election in
field.
November.
Exactly, there may be a
Her name is Karen Ray. She's a member of the Board of Supervisors. I like saying that in San Luis Obispo County. I'm Brad Palmer. Thanks for watching Charter California Edition.